Good morning, dear students. I welcome you all to this online video classes. Dear students, these days we have been conducting even live classes. I hope all of you are attending. I will be teaching you history and civics, and today we are going to begin the first lesson of history. It is about a period of transition. Dear students, today we are going to learn sources of history, mainly primary and secondary sources, then transition from medieval to modern age, Renaissance and Reformation. So, dear students, a period of transition means a period of change. Dear students, during the period from 14th to 17th century, a number of interrelated developments took place which laid the foundation of the modern world. Dear students, during this 14th to 17th century, the world witnessed a number of changes, and these changes laid the foundation of the modern world. Many changes took place towards the end of the Middle Ages, and these changes undermined the feudal system of society, which began to disintegrate. During this period, a new social system began to emerge in Europe, which affected every aspect of life, and this was the beginning of modern age. Sources to study modern period. Dear students, the historians study various sources and they write history of a particular period. And when we talk of the modern period, there were lots of advantages because the historians could get resources of the modern period which were found in abundance, because during this time printing press and there were lots of scientific development. So the sources which the historians required were found in abundance. So we are aware of the various overlaps in the modern world history and modern Indian history. So, dear students, here are the two sources. First one is the primary source. These include archaeological sources, original documents, photographs, newspapers, articles, magazines, pamphlets, videotapes and music. These are the primary sources because these sources gives direct information or knowledge of the history of a particular period or time to the historians. Now we shall study these resources in detail. So, dear students, the first one is archaeological sources. These include old buildings, mainly the colonial buildings, and various monuments, inscriptions. The buildings spread across the country, such as various monuments like Gateway of India, India Gate, Parliament House, Rashtrapati Bhavan. Besides this, in India we have so many palaces and old buildings which were constructed by the various kings and rulers. And dear students, these various colonial buildings help us to understand the administration, help us to understand the culture, help us to understand various architects which were used at the medieval period. For example, at Agra we have Taj Mahal. It gives us important information about various types of architecture and the materials which were used to build Taj Mahal. So, dear students, archaeological sources help us and give us direct information about the history in a particular time period which has happened. Next one is newspapers, magazines, letters and printed books. News articles, letters and magazines belonging to this period, especially this medieval period, are kept in libraries and archives. As I told you, during this time there was printing press and even there was the development of technologies. So, the resources are well preserved in the libraries and archives. They are printed in different languages and in different regions of the country. Some of these newspapers are printed even today. Dear students, at the time of India being ruled by the British, many freedom fighters were writing journals and magazines which were spreaded among the Indians, and mainly the aim of writing such magazines were to arouse among the Indians the feeling of patriotism, okay, and to expose the unjust rule and practices of the British rule, which resulted in the rise of nationalism. So, such writings are preserved in the libraries and archives, which gives us important information about the history of our country in a particular time period. So, books as well tell us about social, economic and political conditions of a period. There are many books, and these books help us to understand about social life of the people, economic life of the people and political conditions that was prevalent in a certain time period. Biographies and autobiographies give an account of the life and ideology of the famous personalities. Okay. Next one is films, photographs and videotapes. Films, pictures, all these different means of media portray or gives clear picture about the lives of famous people and events. Dear students, there are many films which have been made on the historical event, or there are some documentary movie and films which help us to understand about the history of a certain time period. Okay. The impact of such films and video clipping is more permanent as compared to that of other sources, because while we watch films and documentary movie, it helps us to understand better because we see the picture and what is happening, everything is shown very clearly and vividly. So, it helps us to understand very clearly. So, these movies are available even in the internet, which are known as digital archives. Okay. There were so many movies which were related to the history, like Mohenjo-daro, like Bajirao Mastani. All these were very much related to the history. Okay. Next one is maps. Dear students, you might have studied various types of maps in class 6. So, in order to effectively administer India, the British government felt the need to map the subcontinent, for which they got various surveys conducted. Dear students, India was under the British rule for almost 200 years. During this time, the British had set up Survey of India at Dehradun. So, why did the British set up this Survey of India? Because as they were ruling our country, they felt that if they are having the knowledge of our country, knowledge of the land of our country and the place, then they will be able to administer effectively. Therefore, the British government had set up Survey of India at Dehradun. Okay. So, various types of maps are drawn up showing location of towns and cities with various features such as flora and fauna, animals and plants, then demography, population, then topography. Okay. All these maps helped mainly the British government to administer and run their government effectively. So, dear students, looking at those old maps, we get to know regarding the location of a town, city or a place. Okay. So, dear students, all these were the primary sources from which we get the direct information about the history of a certain time period. Now, we shall discuss about the secondary sources. So, this includes reports, reviews, articles, then references like encyclopedia and printed books based on primary sources. Dear students, there are so many historical books which are written, but these written works are based on the primary sources. Okay. So, secondary sources are those sources which are referred to the primary sources and they have been written like printed books, okay, or encyclopedia. Indologists such as James Mill, Max Muller and Vincent Smith, they took very keen interest to study the culture of India and examine many ancient Indian texts. So, these three researchers were known as Indologists because they took keen interest to study the culture of India. So, they took keen interest in Indian culture and examined many ancient texts. Through these texts, the British tried to understand the Indian traditions, customs and norms that would help them to rule effectively. So, what was the mastermind behind studying the culture of India or to examine the culture of India? By studying the culture of India or examining the culture of India, the British knew about Indian customs, traditions and norms which helped them to rule effectively. So, these colonial writers projected the view that India was a backward country and that the British rule in India was a blessing for the Indians. So, dear students, the Indologists, namely James Mill, Max Muller and Vincent Smith, as they studied the culture of our country, they referred many texts and lastly projected that the Indians were poor and India was a backward country. Hence, British rule was a blessing in disguise for India. However, besides this, there were many nationalist writers such as Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. He wanted to rediscover India's glorious past. Then Dadabhai Naroji, he wrote a book called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, in which he exposed the unjust rule of the British. And in this book he has given the drain theory, in which he explains very clearly that India's wealth was drained by the British to England, and Jawaharlal Nehru's discovery of India exposed the negative impact of British rule in India, highlighting India's glorious past. Okay. So, the grievances of the Indians against the British rule were reflected in many writings. One such is Neel Darpan by Dinbandhu Mitra. So, dear students, whatever I have said here, various books by the nationalist writers, these are the part of secondary sources which help us to understand about our history of the medieval period. Okay. Dear students, next one is Renaissance. Renaissance changed almost entire world. So now let us try to understand what is Renaissance. The term Renaissance means rebirth in French. Here, rebirth in the knowledge aspect or in the knowledge level. Renaissance began in Italy around 14th century and spreaded to other parts of the European country, and this Renaissance led to the emergence of modern age. And this Renaissance ushered in the modern period in Europe. So, Renaissance gave birth to modern period or age in European countries. So, during this time, scientific methods of inquiry became popular. As I have told you that Renaissance means rebirth or reawakening at the knowledge level. Okay. So, there were lots of scientific methods of inquiry, and there were lots of innovations, inventions and exploration that took place during the Renaissance period. So, this is the age of reasoning, then questioning, observation and experimentation. Dear students, during this time, Newton discovered law of gravity and many other scientists invented various new things. In this age, the authority of the church was challenged because the ordinary people were able to ask questions. They did not believe anything and everything without asking questions why and how. Okay. So, people were asked not to follow the church practices or beliefs blindly. Okay. They were encouraged to judge on the basis of reason rather than superstitious beliefs. So, dear students, in the European countries also there were lots of superstitions and people were blindly believing the authorities, but because of Renaissance they were able to believe everything based on the reason, and they started asking questions to the authorities of the church. Okay. So, this Renaissance age was reflected its presence even in the art, architecture, literature, new scientific discoveries and inventions. During this time, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci and great English writer and dramatist William Shakespeare, all they started giving much importance to literature and art, and in art and literature there were different expressions. Okay. So, dear students, during this time elements of humanism and realism was given much importance. Okay. Renaissance also influenced the worlds of politics, religion and society. All these factors contributed strongly in the changing the outlook of the European people. So, dear students, there were lots of changes that took place during the age of Renaissance. Due to all these changes, people became rationalist. Okay, they became rationalist. They started asking questions to everything before they would accept. Then, leaving aside their previously held old religious beliefs, people left old religious beliefs and practices. Okay, they became rationalist, and they now adopted more pragmatic approach, the practical approach towards life, and they now believed and accepted based on rational thinking. Therefore, they also began to question the authority of the church. They also began to ask questions to the authority of the church, which wanted to hold on its beliefs. Dear students, it was during this time rationalist scholars rejected all the teachings of the church and refused to accept its authority blindly. They used reason as a yardstick to judge what was true and what was false. And thus, Renaissance period is said to be a period of rebirth, reawakening of the knowledge of the people, which mainly took place in around 4th century in Italy and spreaded in other parts of the European countries. And during this time, another invention gave much impetus and progress to the Renaissance. That was invention of printing press. Printing press was invented, and as a result, many books were published which helped the people to read, and people were able to read the books. Okay, so the invention of printing press and political, social and economic uncertainties in life infused the general feeling of revival, and thus there was a great revival. So with the invention of printing press, people became aware of new diversified ideas. As they read the new books, they were having new ideas, and thus people were awakened. So invention of the printing press was a powerful factor in the spread of Renaissance. So as the printing press was invented, the Renaissance was spreaded most of the European countries and to other parts of the world. After that, many voyages were taken. Voyages were an important factor in the modern period. Many sailors like Vasco da Gama and Christopher Columbus, these were famous explorers who discovered sea routes to the eastern countries, okay, and America. Then extensive overseas explorations emerged as a powerful factor in European culture, and which was the beginning of globalization. So dear students, Renaissance was one of the important factor which resulted in the emergence of modern age. Okay, so dear students, try to watch this video and learn all the important points. In the upcoming video, we shall discuss about another important changes that took place in the European country, that is Reformation. Thank you.